Have you ever reached that moment when someone's cruelest words become the catalyst for your greatest transformation? When I heard my husband Derek call me pathetic in front of his entire family at his 40th birthday party, I didn't break down or cause a scene. Instead, I excused myself, walked to the bathroom, and quietly made a phone call that would change everything. The life insurance policy I'd been paying for the past 8 years? Canceled. Effective immediately. Sometimes the most powerful response isn't an argument, it's action. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Rebecca Chen, though everyone calls me Becca. I never imagined I'd be the type of woman to orchestrate her own liberation from a marriage that had slowly suffocated her spirit. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, I was raised by parents who immigrated from Taiwan with nothing but determination and an unshakable belief in the American dream. My father, David, worked 16-hour days at his small electronics repair shop while my mother, Linda, cleaned office buildings at night to make ends meet. They taught me that success came through education, hard work, and careful planning. I excelled academically, earning a scholarship to Stanford where I studied computer science with a focus on artificial intelligence. While my classmates partied, I spent weekends in the lab, driven by the knowledge that my parents had sacrificed everything for my opportunities. After graduation, I landed a position at a cutting-edge tech startup in San Francisco called Neuralink Dynamics. The company was developing revolutionary AI algorithms for medical diagnostics, and I was part of the core engineering team. My specialty was pattern recognition, teaching computers to identify subtle anomalies in medical imaging that human eyes might miss. It was challenging, meaningful work that felt like I was contributing to something bigger than myself. The startup culture was intense but rewarding. We worked long hours, but we were changing the world. By age 26, I had been promoted to senior AI engineer, and my salary reflected my value to the company. I was earning more money than my parents had ever dreamed possible, and I was proud of what I'd built through my own merit and determination. That's when I met Derek Morrison at a tech conference in Austin. He was giving a presentation on venture capital investment strategies for emerging technologies. Derek was handsome in that polished, corporate way. Tall, athletic build maintained by an expensive personal trainer, perfectly styled brown hair, and the kind of confident smile that suggested he'd never faced real adversity. He was 32 at the time, working for Morrison Capital, a venture capital firm that his grandfather had founded in the 1960s. Derek's presentation was smooth and professional, but it lacked the innovative thinking I was accustomed to in the startup world. During the networking reception afterward, he approached me with a scotch in his hand and an easy charm that I found initially appealing. "Rebecca Chen," he said, having clearly researched the attendees beforehand. "I heard your presentation on medical AI applications. Impressive work. Morrison Capital is always looking for promising investments in the healthcare technology sector." I was flattered by his attention and his apparent understanding of my field. We talked for hours about technology trends, market opportunities, and our respective visions for the future. Derek seemed genuinely interested in my work, asking thoughtful questions about the technical challenges I faced and the potential applications of our algorithms. What I didn't realize then was that Derek had a talent for making people feel like the most important person in the room while he was talking to them. It was a skill he'd developed through years of networking and deal-making, and I was just another target for his charm offensive. We began dating long distance, with Derek flying to San Francisco regularly and me occasionally visiting him in Denver, where Morrison Capital was headquartered. The courtship was romantic in all the traditional ways: expensive dinners, weekend getaways to Napa Valley, thoughtful gifts that showed he'd been paying attention to our conversations. Derek's family was everything mine wasn't. The Morrisons lived in Cherry Hills Village, one of Denver's most exclusive neighborhoods, in a sprawling colonial mansion that had been featured in architectural magazines. His mother, Eleanor Morrison, was a petite woman with silver hair always styled to perfection, and a wardrobe that seemed to consist entirely of designer pieces. She chaired various charity committees and spoke with the kind of refined accent that suggested expensive private schools and careful cultivation. His father, William Morrison, was semi-retired but still maintained an office at Morrison Capital. He had the bearing of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room, shoulders back, firm handshake, eyes that evaluated everyone he met as either useful or irrelevant. Derek's younger sister, Amanda, had married a prominent surgeon and divided her time between charitable work and managing her children's elite private school activities. The Morrison family gatherings were exercises in subtle competition and social positioning. Conversations revolved around country club politics, vacation homes in Aspen and Martha's Vineyard, and the achievements of children attending prestigious universities. Money was never discussed directly, but it permeated every interaction. In the casual mention of private jets, the names of exclusive restaurants, the assumption that everyone understood references to social circles I'd never heard of. Initially, I was fascinated by this world so different from my own. The Morrisons seemed to glide through life without the financial anxieties that had defined my childhood. They spoke of opportunities and connections as if they were inherited rights rather than earned privileges. Derek seemed different from his family during our courtship period. He expressed admiration for my work ethic and my technical expertise. He said he found my background refreshing compared to the women in his usual social circle, who, according to him, lacked ambition and intellectual curiosity. When I described the long hours I spent debugging algorithms or the satisfaction of solving complex technical problems, he appeared genuinely engaged. "You're brilliant, Becca," he would say. "You see patterns and solutions that others miss. That's a rare gift." I believed him because I wanted to believe him. After years of being valued primarily for my technical contributions, it felt wonderful to be appreciated as a complete person by someone who seemed to understand both my professional accomplishments and my personal dreams. After 18 months of dating, Derek proposed during a weekend trip to Carmel. The ring was stunning, a 2-carat princess-cut diamond set in platinum that probably cost more than my parents' annual income. The proposal itself was picture-perfect, taking place at sunset on the beach with a photographer discreetly positioned to capture the moment. I said yes because I loved him, or thought I did. More honestly, I said yes because I loved the version of myself I became when I was with him. Confident, sophisticated, worthy of the kind of romance I'd only seen in movies. The engagement period lasted 6 months, during which Eleanor Morrison took complete control of wedding planning. She had opinions about everything. The venue, the flowers, the menu, the guest list, even my dress. When I suggested incorporating some elements that reflected my Chinese heritage, Eleanor's response was diplomatically dismissive. "Darling, we want the wedding to feel cohesive and elegant," she said over lunch at her country club. "Perhaps we could incorporate some subtle Asian influences in the floral arrangements, but we don't want anything too ethnic. The Morrison family has certain traditions to maintain." I should have recognized this as a preview of my future in the Morrison family, but I was too focused on the fairy tale aspects of marrying into wealth and social prominence. I convinced myself that Eleanor's preferences were about maintaining elegance, not erasing my identity. The wedding was held at the Denver Country Club, with 300 guests, a string quartet, and enough flowers to stock a florist shop. My parents attended, looking slightly overwhelmed but proud. They had insisted on contributing financially to the wedding, despite Derek's assurances that it wasn't necessary, and I could see them calculating the cost of everything around them with a mixture of awe and anxiety. During the reception, I overheard Eleanor talking to one of her friends about the wedding. "Derek could have had his pick of anyone," she was saying, "but Rebecca is quite accomplished in her field. She's very practical. Good genes for grandchildren, you know. All that Asian emphasis on education and achievement." The comment stung, but I pushed it aside. This was my wedding day, and I was determined to focus on the happiness and promise of the future Derek and I were building together. After the honeymoon in Tuscany, I relocated to Denver and began working remotely for Neuralink Dynamics. The transition was challenging. I missed the energy of the San Francisco tech scene and the daily collaboration with my brilliant colleagues. Working from home in Derek's spacious but sterile downtown condo felt isolating after years of being surrounded by the creative chaos of a startup environment. Derek encouraged me to look for local opportunities, suggesting that Denver's growing tech scene might offer interesting possibilities. "You could even consider joining Morrison Capital," he said one evening over dinner. We're always looking for technical expertise to help evaluate potential investments. You could be incredibly valuable in assessing AI and medical technology deals. The suggestion felt wrong to me, though I couldn't articulate why at the time. The idea of transitioning from building technology to merely evaluating it as an investment opportunity seemed like a step backward. More troubling was the implication that my value lay in what I could contribute to Derek's family business, rather than in pursuing my own career trajectory. I appreciate the offer, I told him, but I'd prefer to find something that lets me continue developing technology, rather than just analyzing it for investment potential. Derek's response was supportive on the surface, but carried an undertone of disappointment. Of course, whatever makes you happy. I just thought it might be nice for us to work together, to be a real team. Over the following months, I began to notice subtle changes in how Derek spoke about my work. When Neuralink Dynamics faced a technical challenge that required my expertise, Derek would make comments about how demanding the startup was being. When I needed to travel to San Francisco for important meetings, he would express concern about the frequency of my trips and the stress they seemed to cause. "You're working too hard, sweetheart," he would say. "Maybe it's time to consider something less demanding. We don't need the money, and I worry about you burning out." At first, I interpreted his concern as caring, but gradually I realized it was something else entirely. Derek was uncomfortable with the independence my career provided. He wanted a wife who would be available for his social obligations, who would prioritize his needs and his family's expectations above her own professional ambitions. The Morrison family social calendar was extensive and non-negotiable. There were charity galas, country club events, investment firm dinners, and family gatherings that required my attendance. Eleanor would call with last-minute invitations that were really obligations, expecting me to drop whatever I was working on to attend events where I felt like an outsider trying to decode unspoken social rules. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. "Rebecca, dear," Eleanor would say, "we need you at the Children's Hospital fundraiser on Thursday. Derek's colleagues will be there with their wives, and it's important for Morrison Capital's reputation that we show strong family support for community causes." When I explained that I had crucial deadlines or important conference calls, Eleanor's response was always the same combination of sympathy and disappointment. "I understand that your little projects are important to you, but surely they can wait a few hours. Family obligations must come first." The phrase "little projects" particularly grated on me. I was developing algorithms that could save lives by detecting cancer earlier than ever before possible, but to Eleanor, my work was just a hobby that interfered with my real responsibilities as Derek's wife. Derek's attitude toward my career became increasingly condescending as our first year of marriage progressed. When I explained complex technical problems I was solving, his eyes would glaze over with polite disinterest. When I celebrated professional achievements, a successful product launch, recognition from industry peers, a significant salary increase, his congratulations felt perfunctory. More troubling was how he began to frame my successes when discussing them with others. At dinner parties, Derek would introduce me as my brilliant wife who works in computers, rather than mentioning my specific expertise or achievements. When friends or colleagues asked about my work, Derek would often answer for me, providing vague descriptions that stripped away the technical sophistication and innovation of what I actually did. "Becca works with artificial intelligence," he would say, as if I were a secretary rather than a senior engineer developing cutting-edge technology. "She's very technical, much smarter than me with all that computer stuff." The dismissive tone made my accomplishments sound like party tricks rather than legitimate professional expertise. I began to suspect that Derek was uncomfortable with my technical knowledge, surpassing his understanding. His venture capital work required broad knowledge across many industries, but didn't demand the deep expertise I had developed in my specialized field. Our social life increasingly revolved around Derek's preferences and connections. The restaurants we visited, the weekend activities we pursued, the friends we spent time with, everything was filtered through Derek's comfort zone and social requirements. When I suggested activities that reflected my interests or invited colleagues I'd worked with, Derek would find reasons why those plans wouldn't work or weren't appropriate. I'm not sure your startup friends would fit in with our group, he said when I suggested inviting some Neuralink Dynamics colleagues to a dinner party. They're probably not comfortable with this level of formality. Maybe we could arrange something separate for them. The clear implication was that my professional relationships weren't sophisticated enough for Derek's social circle. My colleagues, some of whom held PhDs from top universities and were developing revolutionary technologies, were somehow beneath the venture capitalists and trust fund inheritors who comprised Derek's friend group. 8 months into our marriage, Neuralink Dynamics was acquired by a major pharmaceutical company for $800 million. As a senior engineer with equity in the company, my portion of the acquisition payout was substantial, more money than I had ever imagined having. The acquisition was validation that our work had genuine value and would have real-world impact on medical diagnostics. I was excited to share the news with Derek, expecting him to be proud of my success and the financial security it would provide for our future. Instead, his reaction was complicated and somewhat troubling. "That's wonderful, honey," he said, but his enthusiasm felt forced. "Though I hope this doesn't mean you'll be working even longer hours during the transition." When I explained that the acquisition actually gave me options, I could stay with the new company, start my own venture, or take time to consider my next career move, Derek's response revealed his true feelings. "Maybe this is the perfect opportunity to step back from all the stress and pressure," he suggested. "You've proven yourself professionally. Now you could focus on other things. Our marriage, starting a family, maybe getting more involved with Morrison Capital, or the charitable work Mother is always talking about." The suggestion that I should use my professional success as an excuse to abandon my career was deeply unsettling. Derek wasn't seeing my achievement as a launching pad for even greater opportunities. He was seeing it as a convenient exit ramp from the career that made him uncomfortable. That night, as Derek slept beside me, I lay awake thinking about the trajectory of our relationship. The man who had once claimed to admire my ambition and intelligence was now subtly but consistently encouraging me to diminish those very qualities. The family who had welcomed me as an interesting addition to their social circle was gradually making it clear that my value lay in supporting Derek's image rather than pursuing my own goals. I realized I was at a crossroads, though I didn't yet have the courage to acknowledge how significant that moment would prove to be. The signs of deeper problems in our marriage were already visible, but I was still hoping that things would improve, that Derek would remember why he had fallen in love with me in the first place. Looking back now, I can see that the foundation of our relationship was already cracked. The respect and partnership I thought we shared was actually a performance Derek maintained only as long as my independence didn't threaten his comfort or his family's expectations. But at the time, I was still trying to make our marriage work, still believing that love and compromise could bridge the growing gap between who I was and who Derek wanted me to become. The real test was still ahead of us, waiting in the form of a birthday party that would finally show me exactly where I stood in Derek's life, and exactly what I was worth to the man I had married. The changes in our marriage didn't happen overnight. They crept in gradually, like water seeping through microscopic cracks in a foundation until the entire structure becomes compromised. By our second year of marriage, I had begun to recognize patterns in Derek's behavior that I had initially dismissed as temporary adjustments to married life. The first major incident occurred during a Morrison Capital investor dinner at the exclusive Union Club downtown. Derek had asked me to attend as his wife, emphasizing how important it was for him to present a united front to potential investors. I had agreed, despite having a crucial product demonstration scheduled for the next morning with our pharmaceutical partners. The dinner was formal, black tie required, with carefully orchestrated seating arrangements that reflected the social hierarchy of Denver's financial elite. I found myself seated between Harold Whitman, a retired oil executive, and Margaret Fitzgerald, the wife of a prominent real estate developer. Both seemed pleasant enough initially, though their conversation topics revolved around private school admissions, vacation home renovations, and charity committee politics. "And what do you do, dear?" Margaret asked me as the second course arrived. Her tone was polite, but carried the subtle condescension I had grown accustomed to in Derek's social circle. "I'm a senior AI engineer," I replied. "I develop machine learning algorithms for medical diagnostic applications." We're working on technology that can detect early-stage cancers from routine medical imaging. Margaret's expression shifted to polite confusion. How fascinating. That sounds terribly complicated. I could never understand all that technical business. Harold, didn't your grandson study something similar at MIT? Harold nodded absently. Computer science, yes. Bright boy, but he's gone into investment banking now. Much more practical career path, if you ask me. All this technology work seems so uncertain. The dismissal stung, particularly because it reflected the attitude I was encountering more frequently in Derek's world. My expertise was treated as an amusing curiosity rather than a legitimate professional accomplishment. When the conversation turned to other topics, I found myself excluded from discussions about art collections, wine investments, and social connections that required years of inherited cultural knowledge to navigate. Midway through the dinner, Derek stood to give a presentation about Morrison Capital's latest investment fund. His speech was polished and confident, highlighting the firm's track record and their strategic approach to emerging market opportunities. When he mentioned their recent interest in healthcare technology investments, I expected him to acknowledge my expertise in the field. Instead, Derek said, "We're fortunate to have access to technical insights that help us evaluate these complex opportunities. My wife, Rebecca, has provided a valuable perspective on artificial intelligence applications, helping us understand market potential from an insider's viewpoint." The way he phrased it made me sound like an informal consultant rather than an accomplished professional with legitimate expertise. More troubling was the implication that my primary value lay in supporting Derek's business interests rather than pursuing my own career goals. After the dinner, as we drove home through Denver's quiet streets, I tried to address what had happened. "Derek, when you mentioned my work tonight, it sounded like I was just helping you evaluate investments rather than having my own career in the field." Derek glanced at me with surprise. "I was giving you credit for your contributions. I thought you'd appreciate being recognized." "I do appreciate recognition," I said carefully, "but it felt like you were positioning me as an extension of Morrison Capital, rather than acknowledging my independent expertise." His hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "Becca, I'm proud of what you do, but in that context, it made sense to frame your knowledge in terms that the investors could understand and relate to. They're not tech people. They need to see the practical business applications." The explanation sounded reasonable on the surface, but something about it bothered me. Derek wasn't wrong that the investors needed context, but his framing had subtly diminished my professional identity in favor of supporting his business narrative. This pattern repeated itself at subsequent social events. Derek would introduce me as his wife, who works in technology or knows about computers, rarely mentioning my specific expertise or achievements. When I tried to contribute to conversations about innovation or emerging technologies, Derek would often redirect the discussion or speak over me to provide his own interpretation of what I had said. The most frustrating aspect was how Derek seemed oblivious to what he was doing. When I attempted to discuss it with him, he would express genuine confusion about my concerns. From his perspective, he was being supportive by including me in his professional world. He couldn't understand why I felt marginalized when he was actively trying to make me part of his business community. Meanwhile, my work at Neuralink Dynamics was becoming increasingly demanding as we transitioned into the pharmaceutical company's structure. The acquisition had brought new resources and opportunities, but also increased pressure to deliver results on accelerated timelines. I was leading a team of 12 engineers working on next-generation diagnostic algorithms that could potentially revolutionize early disease detection. The work was intellectually challenging and professionally rewarding, but it required long hours and intense focus. Some days I would be so absorbed in solving complex technical problems that I would forget to eat lunch or return phone calls. Other days involved traveling to conferences or meeting with medical professionals to understand their diagnostic challenges and requirements. Derek's attitude toward my work schedule became increasingly critical. When I worked late on important deadlines, he would express frustration about missed dinner plans or social obligations. When I traveled for business, he would make comments about how frequently I was gone and how it affected our marriage. "I feel like I'm competing with your job for your attention," he said one evening after I had to cancel dinner plans to resolve a critical system failure. "We barely see each other anymore, and when we are together, you're always thinking about work." I tried to explain that the intensity was temporary, that we were working toward major product releases that would establish the foundation for future success. But Derek seemed to view my professional commitments as choices I was making to prioritize work over our relationship. Other wives managed to balance their careers without letting them take over their entire lives, he said during one particularly tense conversation. Maybe you need to consider whether this level of stress and demand is really worth it. The suggestion that I should scale back my career to accommodate Derek's social preferences was becoming a recurring theme. It wasn't presented as an ultimatum, but rather as concerned advice about my well-being and our marriage's health. Derek was skilled at framing his discomfort with my independence as caring about my happiness. Around this time, Derek began making more specific suggestions about how I might redirect my professional energy. Morrison Capital was launching a new division focused on healthcare technology investments, and Derek thought I would be perfect to lead their technical evaluation team. You'd be working with cutting-edge companies, providing strategic guidance on their development and market potential, he explained over breakfast one morning. It would be intellectually challenging work, and you'd be shaping the future of healthcare innovation from an investment perspective. Quote, the opportunity sounded impressive on the surface, but I recognized it as another attempt to channel my expertise into supporting Derek's family business rather than pursuing my own career path. Working for Morrison Capital would make me financially dependent on Derek's family while limiting my ability to make independent professional decisions. I appreciate the offer, I told him, but I'm committed to finishing the projects I'm working on. The diagnostic algorithms we're developing could save thousands of lives if we get them right. Derek's expression showed a flicker of irritation before he composed himself. Of course, I understand your dedication. I just worry that you're missing opportunities to have broader impact. Investment decisions affect entire industries, not just individual products. The conversation revealed a fundamental difference in how we viewed professional success. Derek saw influence and financial control as the ultimate measures of achievement, while I valued direct contribution to solving important problems. His world was about managing and directing resources. Mine was about creating solutions that didn't previously exist. This philosophical divide became more apparent as Derek began involving me in more Morrison Capital social events. The firm regularly hosted dinners and networking gatherings, where potential investors mingled with entrepreneurs seeking funding. Derek would introduce me to promising startup founders, expecting me to provide technical assessments of their business plans. Initially, I found these interactions interesting. It was fascinating to see early-stage companies working on problems similar to those I encountered in my own work. But I gradually realized that Derek was positioning me as an unofficial technical advisor for Morrison Capital, providing expertise that would inform their investment decisions. What did you think of that biotech startup? Derek would ask after these events. Did their technology claims seem credible to you? I would provide honest assessments based on my technical knowledge, not realizing that Derek was incorporating my insights into Morrison Capital's due diligence process. My informal opinions were becoming part of their official investment evaluations, but I wasn't receiving any compensation or recognition for this contribution. When I finally understood what was happening, I felt manipulated and used. Derek was leveraging my expertise to enhance Morrison Capital's competitive advantage, while simultaneously pressuring me to reduce my commitment to my own career. He wanted access to my technical knowledge without respecting my professional autonomy. Derek, I don't feel comfortable providing unofficial technical assessments for Morrison Capital's investment decisions, I told him after attending a particularly intensive networking dinner. If you want me to contribute to your due diligence process, that should be a formal arrangement with appropriate compensation and recognition. His response revealed how differently we viewed the situation. Becca, we're married. What helps Morrison Capital helps our family. I don't understand why you're suddenly treating this like a business transaction. The expectation that I should freely contribute my professional expertise to Derek's family business simply because we were married was deeply troubling. It suggested that Derek viewed my skills and knowledge as marital assets rather than personal accomplishments that I controlled. This tension came to a head during a family dinner at the Morrison mansion. Eleanor had invited several prominent Denver couples, including the mayor and his wife, the head of the Denver Art Museum, and a federal judge who had recently been appointed to the appellate court. The conversation was sophisticated and wide-ranging, touching on politics, cultural trends, and economic developments. When the discussion turned to healthcare policy and medical innovation, I saw an opportunity to contribute meaningfully to the conversation. I began explaining how artificial intelligence was revolutionizing diagnostic medicine and the potential policy implications of these technological advances. The other guests seemed genuinely interested, asking thoughtful questions about implementation challenges and regulatory considerations. I was enjoying the intellectual engagement when Derek interrupted. "Rebecca's being modest about her expertise," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "She's been incredibly helpful to Morrison Capital in evaluating healthcare technology investments. Her insights have been invaluable in identifying promising opportunities." Once again, Derek had reframed my professional knowledge in terms of how it benefited his family's business, rather than acknowledging my independent expertise. But this time, he had done it in front of influential people who I might want to network with professionally in the future. After dinner, Eleanor approached me while the men retired to William's study for cigars and political discussion. "Rebecca, dear, Derek has mentioned how helpful you've been with Morrison Capital's healthcare investments. Have you given any thought to making that role more formal? We could certainly use someone with your technical background on our investment committee." The offer was presented as an honor, but I recognized it as another attempt to co-opt my professional identity into the Morrison family structure. They wanted to formalize my contribution to their business while eliminating my independent career that made them uncomfortable. "I appreciate the confidence," I replied carefully, "but I'm committed to my current work developing diagnostic technology. The projects I'm working on are at critical stages." Eleanor's expression showed polite disappointment, tinged with incomprehension. "Of course, though I do hope you'll consider the broader impact you could have through investment decisions. Sometimes guiding capital allocation creates more change than individual technical contributions." The conversation reflected the Morrison family's fundamental inability to understand why I wouldn't want to abandon my career in favor of supporting their business interests. From their perspective, they were offering me access to wealth and influence that far exceeded anything I could achieve independently. They couldn't comprehend why I would value professional autonomy over financial security and social status. That evening, as Derek and I drove home, the tension between us was palpable. "You were pretty dismissive of Mother's offer tonight," he said as we pulled into our driveway. "Morrison Capital could provide incredible opportunities for you." "The opportunity to give up my own career to support your family's business interests," I replied. "Derek, I've built something meaningful in my work. I'm not ready to abandon that to become another Morrison Capital employee." His frustration finally surfaced. "Why do you always frame it as giving something up? This could be a chance to have broader influence, to work at a strategic level instead of getting lost in technical details that most people don't understand or care about." The phrase "technical details that most people don't understand" revealed Derek's true attitude toward my work. He saw my expertise as arcane knowledge that was impressive, but ultimately impractical. In his world, influence came from controlling resources and making high-level decisions, not from solving complex problems or creating innovative solutions. "Those technical details save lives, Derek," I said quietly. "The algorithms I develop help doctors catch cancer early enough to cure it. That's not less important than deciding which companies deserve investment funding." Derek sighed, running his hand through his hair in the gesture I had once found endearing, but now recognized as a sign of his impatience with conversations that challenged his worldview. "I'm not saying your work isn't important, Becca. I just think you're limiting yourself by staying so focused on one narrow area. You could have a much broader impact through Morrison Capital." The fundamental disconnect in our values was becoming impossible to ignore. Derek measured success by financial returns and social influence, while I valued direct contribution to solving important problems. He wanted a wife who would enhance his professional image and support his family's business interests. I wanted a husband who would respect my professional autonomy and celebrate my independent achievements. As we prepared for bed that night, I realized that our marriage was approaching a crisis point. The love and partnership I had believed we shared was revealed to be conditional on my willingness to subordinate my professional identity to Derek's comfort and his family's expectations. The man who had once claimed to admire my ambition and intelligence was systematically trying to diminish those very qualities. But I wasn't ready to give up on our marriage yet. I still hoped that Derek would recognize what he was asking me to sacrifice and choose to support my career rather than trying to redirect it. I still believed that love and communication could bridge the growing gap between who I was and who Derek wanted me to become. I had no idea that the real test of our relationship was approaching rapidly, in the form of Derek's 40th birthday celebration that would finally force both of us to confront the fundamental incompatibility that had been building beneath the surface of our seemingly successful marriage. The moment when Derek's true feelings about me would be revealed with a single, devastating word that would change everything between us forever. The third year of our marriage brought changes that I hadn't anticipated, revelations that would fundamentally alter my understanding of the man I had married and the life we had built together. It began with what seemed like a routine request from Derek, but would ultimately expose truths that had been carefully hidden beneath the polished surface of our relationship. In March, Derek announced that Morrison Capital was being audited by the IRS as part of a routine examination of their investment practices. Nothing serious, he assured me, just standard due diligence that successful firms occasionally faced. However, the audit would require comprehensive documentation of all financial relationships and potential conflicts of interest. "I need to ask you for a favor," Derek said one evening as we sat in our living room, the city lights twinkling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of our downtown condo. "The auditors want complete transparency about family financial arrangements. I need you to provide documentation of your income, investments, and any consulting relationships you might have." The request seemed reasonable on the surface. We were married, and Derek's family business was substantial enough to warrant thorough scrutiny. I gathered my financial records, employment contracts, and investment statements, assuming this was simply part of the comprehensive disclosure process. But as I compiled the documents, I began to notice patterns that I hadn't previously connected. Several of my professional recommendations had influenced Morrison Capital investments in companies I had evaluated. My informal assessments of startup technologies had been incorporated into official due diligence reports. My technical expertise had been leveraged far more extensively than I had realized. When I presented the documentation to Derek, I also raised questions about how my informal consultations had been used. "Derek, I've been reviewing some of the companies Morrison Capital has invested in recently, and several of them were startups I provided technical assessments for at your networking events. Were my opinions really that influential in your investment decisions?" Derek's response was carefully measured, the tone he used when discussing sensitive business matters. "Your insights were valuable, certainly. You helped us understand technical risks that we might have overlooked otherwise. That's exactly the kind of expertise that makes Morrison Capital more competitive." Something in his phrasing made me uncomfortable. But these weren't formal consulting arrangements. I was just providing casual opinions at social events. How did those conversations become part of your official investment process? For the first time in our marriage, Derek looked genuinely uncomfortable with my questions. He avoided direct eye contact, focusing instead on the financial documents spread across our dining table. The line between formal and informal advice isn't always clear in our business. Relationships matter more than official titles or contracts. His evasiveness triggered my analytical instincts. I had spent years debugging complex systems by identifying inconsistencies and following logical patterns to their conclusions. Derek's behavior suggested there were aspects of this situation that he wasn't revealing. Over the following week, I began conducting my own investigation. I used my technical skills to research Morrison Capital's recent investments, cross-referencing them with companies I remembered discussing at various social events. The correlation was stronger than I had suspected. Nearly 40% of Morrison Capital's healthcare technology investments over the past 2 years had been companies I had provided informal assessments about. More troubling was what I discovered about the performance of these investments. The companies I had recommended were consistently outperforming the broader market, while the ones I had expressed reservations about were struggling. My technical expertise had been generating substantial profits for Morrison Capital, but I had received no compensation or formal recognition for these contributions. I decided to confront Derek directly about what I had discovered. That Saturday morning, I presented him with a detailed analysis of the correlation between my informal recommendations and Morrison Capital's investment decisions. Derek, I need you to explain something to me, I said, laying out printed charts and financial data on our kitchen island. These numbers show that Morrison Capital has made millions of dollars based on my technical assessments of startup companies. Assessments that I provided for free at social events, thinking I was just making conversation. Derek studied the documents, his expression shifting from surprise to resignation. Becca, you're making this sound more calculated than it actually was. We value your opinions because you're brilliant, but nothing, I interrupted. You've been systematically extracting professional expertise from me for years, while encouraging me to reduce my commitment to my own career. You wanted access to my knowledge without respecting my professional autonomy. The confrontation I had been avoiding for months finally erupted. Derek's carefully maintained composure cracked, revealing frustrations that had apparently been building as long as my own. You want to talk about professional respect? He said, his voice rising. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to constantly explain why my wife is too busy with her, quote, important projects to attend family obligations? Do you know what it's like to watch other wives support their husbands' careers while mine treats her job like it's more important than our marriage? The word job was delivered with particular disdain, as if my career was a hobby that had gotten out of hand rather than a legitimate professional calling. It revealed how Derek truly viewed my work as something that interfered with my real responsibilities as his wife. My career isn't a job, Derek. It's my profession, my expertise, my contribution to the world. And yes, sometimes it is more important than cocktail parties and charity dinners, because the work I do actually saves lives. Derek laughed bitterly. Saves lives? Becca, you write computer code. You're not performing surgery or discovering miracle cures. You're a very skilled technician who's convinced herself that her work is more meaningful than it actually is. The dismissal was breathtaking in its cruelty and ignorance. Derek had reduced years of advanced education, innovative research, and breakthrough achievements to, quote, writing computer code. He had revealed that he fundamentally misunderstood, or chose to misunderstand, the nature and importance of my work. A very skilled technician, I repeated, tasting the bitter condescension in his words. Is that really how you see me? After 3 years of marriage, after watching me develop algorithms that are revolutionizing medical diagnostics, you think I'm just a technician? Derek's expression showed a flicker of regret, as if he realized he had gone too far, but instead of apologizing, he doubled down on his position. I think you're incredibly intelligent and talented. But I also think you've lost perspective about what really matters. Family matters. Relationships matter. Building something together matters more than individual achievements. The irony was staggering. Derek was lecturing me about building something together while simultaneously exploiting my expertise for his family's business benefit. He wanted me to sacrifice my professional identity for our relationship while he used my knowledge to advance his own career. Building something together, I said slowly. Like Morrison Capital building its investment returns on my unpaid technical expertise? Derek's face flushed with anger. That's not fair. You're part of this family now. What Morrison Capital benefits us. I don't understand why you're suddenly treating everything like a transaction. The conversation revealed the fundamental breach in our relationship. Derek expected me to contribute my professional expertise to his family's benefit, while abandoning my own career aspirations. He wanted partnership on his terms, where my value lay in supporting his success rather than pursuing my own. That evening, after Derek left for a Morrison Capital dinner that I had deliberately chosen not to attend, I made a decision that would prove to be pivotal. I called my former colleague Jennifer Walsh, who had left Neuralink Dynamics to start her own AI consultancy firm in Boston. Becca, Jennifer's voice was warm and enthusiastic. It's been too long. How are things in Denver? I explained my situation carefully, describing Derek's exploitation of my expertise and the pressure I was facing to abandon my career for his family's business interests. Jennifer listened without interruption, asking thoughtful questions about the specific technical assessments I had provided and their financial impact. What you're describing is intellectual property theft, Jennifer said bluntly when I finished. If Morrison Capital has been using your professional expertise to make investment decisions without compensation or formal recognition, that's potentially actionable. Have you documented these consultations? I hadn't, but Jennifer's reaction confirmed that my instincts about the situation were correct. Derek's family had been exploiting my knowledge while systematically undermining my professional independence. They wanted access to my expertise without respecting my autonomy or compensating me fairly. More importantly, Jennifer continued, what do you want to do about it? Are you interested in making a change? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Was I ready to confront the reality of my marriage and take steps to protect my professional future? Was I prepared to stop hoping that Derek would change and start planning for a life that didn't depend on his respect or approval? I'm not sure yet, I admitted, but I'm tired of feeling like my career is something I have to apologize for. Jennifer's response was exactly what I needed to hear. Your work is extraordinary, Becca. The diagnostic algorithms you've developed are changing how diseases are detected and treated. Don't let anyone convince you that technical innovation is less valuable than financial manipulation. After hanging up, I spent hours researching my legal options regarding the unauthorized use of my professional expertise. What I discovered was both encouraging and disturbing. Derek's use of my informal consultations likely constituted intellectual property violations, but proving the extent of the damage would require comprehensive documentation that I didn't possess. More significantly, I began researching my financial position independent of Derek's family wealth. The acquisition of Neuralink Dynamics had left me with substantial personal assets, but I had allowed Derek to handle most of our financial planning and investment decisions. I needed to understand exactly what resources I controlled independently. The next morning, I scheduled appointments with a personal financial advisor and an intellectual property attorney, both selected specifically because they had no connections to Morrison Capital or the Morrison family social circle. I needed objective professional advice from people who weren't influenced by Derek's wealth or social position. The financial review revealed information that surprised me. My personal net worth was substantially higher than I had realized, thanks to the continued performance of investments I had made before marriage and the ongoing royalties from technology patents I held. I wasn't as dependent on Derek's financial support as I had assumed. More importantly, the intellectual property attorney confirmed that Morrison Capital's use of my expertise likely violated several legal principles, even though I had provided the consultations informally. The financial impact of my recommendations could potentially support a significant claim for compensation. The challenge, the attorney explained, is proving the direct causal relationship between your recommendations and their investment decisions. If you decide to pursue this, you'll need to document everything carefully and be prepared for a complex legal process. I wasn't ready to initiate legal action yet, but understanding my options provided a sense of empowerment that I hadn't felt in months. Derek's exploitation of my expertise wasn't just personally hurtful, it was potentially actionable. I had resources and legal standing that could protect my interests if necessary. That weekend, Derek suggested we attend a Morrison Capital investor retreat in Aspen, an annual gathering where the firm's partners mingled with their most important clients. In previous years, I had enjoyed these events as opportunities to meet interesting people and see beautiful locations. This year, I viewed the invitation with suspicion. What exactly would my role be at this retreat, I asked. Am I attending as your wife, or are you expecting me to provide technical assessments of potential investments? Derek's response confirmed my growing understanding of how he viewed my participation in these events. Both, I suppose. The investors enjoy meeting you, and your insights about healthcare technology trends are always valuable. It's a good opportunity for you to see the broader impact of the investment world. The expectation that I would continue providing unpaid consulting services while being pressured to abandon my own career was becoming intolerable. Derek wanted me to be an asset for Morrison Capital while surrendering my professional independence. I don't think I'm going to attend, I told him. I have important deadlines to meet, and I'm not comfortable continuing to provide informal technical consultations without proper compensation or recognition. Derek's reaction was immediate and revealing. Becca, these relationships are important for our future. You can't just withdraw from the business community because you're upset about some perceived slight. The phrase perceived slight crystallized everything that was wrong with our relationship. Derek genuinely believed that my concerns about professional exploitation were oversensitive reactions, rather than legitimate grievances. He couldn't understand why I wasn't grateful for the opportunity to support his family's business interests. It's not a perceived slight, Derek. It's systematic exploitation of my professional expertise for Morrison Capital's benefit while I'm being pressured to abandon my own career. I'm not going to continue participating in that dynamic. For the first time in our marriage, Derek looked genuinely shocked by my refusal to accommodate his expectations. He had become accustomed to my compliance with his social and professional demands, and my newfound assertiveness caught him off guard. "I don't understand what's happened to you," he said. "You used to be supportive of my career, willing to be part of the team. Now you're treating everything like it's adversarial." The conversation revealed Derek's fundamental misunderstanding of partnership. In his mind, being part of the team meant subordinating my professional interests to his family's business needs. He couldn't conceive of a marriage where both partners pursued independent career goals with mutual support and respect. That night, as Derek made phone calls explaining my absence from the investor retreat, I realized that our marriage had reached a point of irreconcilable differences. Derek would never respect my professional autonomy because doing so would require acknowledging that my career was as important as his. He would never stop exploiting my expertise because he genuinely believed that marriage entitled him to my professional contributions without fair compensation. More importantly, I was no longer willing to sacrifice my career and professional identity for a relationship that demanded I diminish myself to make Derek comfortable. The woman who had earned advanced degrees, developed revolutionary technology, and built substantial personal wealth wasn't going to disappear simply because her husband preferred a more traditional wife. The confrontation I had been avoiding was approaching rapidly. Derek's 40th birthday party was planned for the following month, an elaborate celebration that would bring together his family, business colleagues, and social circle. I knew that event would serve as a test of our relationship, a moment when Derek would expect me to play the role of the supportive wife, while I had finally decided to assert my professional independence. But I had no idea that the birthday party would become the setting for a revelation so devastating, a public humiliation so complete, that it would finally give me the clarity and motivation I needed to end our marriage definitively. The moment when Derek would reveal exactly what he thought of me in front of everyone who mattered to him, using a single word that would change everything between us forever. The weeks leading up to Derek's 40th birthday party became a period of intense preparation, though not the kind Eleanor Morrison had in mind when she began orchestrating what she called the social event of the season. While Derek's mother busied herself with caterers, florists, and guest lists, I was conducting my own careful planning for what I suspected would be a pivotal moment in my marriage. My first priority was securing my financial independence completely. The meetings with my financial advisor had revealed that I possessed more assets than I had realized, but much of my wealth was entangled with Derek's family investments and accounts. I needed to create a clear separation between my personal finances and the Morrison family money. I opened new accounts at a different bank, one that had no business relationships with Morrison Capital. I transferred my personal investments, including the substantial proceeds from the Neuralink Dynamics acquisition, into accounts that were solely in my name. Most importantly, I began documenting every financial transaction that might become relevant if my marriage ended in divorce. The intellectual property attorney I had consulted provided me with a detailed strategy for protecting my professional interests. Dr. Sarah Martinez was a sharp woman in her early 50s who specialized in technology patents and corporate intellectual property disputes. Her office was located in downtown Denver's financial district, far from the social circles where the Morrison family held influence. "The unauthorized use of your technical expertise is more serious than most people realize," Dr. Martinez explained during our second consultation. "Morrison Capital has essentially been operating an informal consulting relationship without compensation or proper legal structure. If you decide to pursue this, we could seek damages based on the profits they've generated from your recommendations." She handed me a thick folder containing forms and documentation templates. "I need you to reconstruct every instance where you provided technical assessments that influenced Morrison Capital's investment decisions. Dates, companies involved, the nature of your recommendations, and any follow-up communications. The more detailed the documentation, the stronger our potential case. The process of documenting Derek's exploitation of my expertise was both illuminating and infuriating. As I reviewed my calendar and reconstructed conversations from the past 3 years, I identified dozens of instances where my informal opinions had clearly influenced Morrison Capital's investment strategies. The total financial impact was staggering. My unpaid consultations had likely generated over $15 million in profits for Derek's family business. More disturbing was the pattern of deliberate manipulation I uncovered. Derek had systematically introduced me to startup founders and entrepreneurs, presenting these meetings as social occasions while actually conducting informal due diligence. He had used my technical expertise to gain competitive advantages in investment negotiations, often without the entrepreneurs realizing they were being evaluated. In one particularly egregious example, I discovered that Derek had recorded a conversation where I provided detailed technical analysis of a biomedical startup's claims. The recording had been transcribed and incorporated into Morrison Capital's official investment evaluation, but I had never been informed that the conversation was being documented or used for business purposes. "This is corporate espionage," Dr. Martinez said when I showed her the transcript. "Using recorded conversations without consent to make investment decisions crosses several legal lines. If we can prove this was a systematic practice, it significantly strengthens your position." The legal implications of Derek's behavior were becoming clear, but I wasn't ready to initiate formal proceedings yet. First, I wanted to give him one final opportunity to acknowledge what he had done and make amends. Perhaps if I confronted him with undeniable evidence of his exploitation, he would recognize the damage to our relationship and commit to genuine change. Meanwhile, Eleanor Morrison's preparations for Derek's birthday celebration were reaching elaborate proportions. The party was planned for the Grand Ballroom at the Denver Art Museum, with 200 guests, including Denver's political and business elite. Eleanor had hired a renowned event planner who specialized in high society gatherings, and the budget was apparently unlimited. "Rebecca, darling," Eleanor said during one of our planning conversations, "I hope you're prepared for quite an evening. This will be the kind of celebration that people remember for years. Derek deserves recognition for everything he's accomplished, and this party will certainly provide that." I had agreed to attend and participate in the celebration, though my motivations were very different from Eleanor's. The party would serve as a test of Derek's willingness to publicly acknowledge my professional accomplishments and treat me as an equal partner, rather than an accessory to his success. In the weeks before the party, I made several strategic decisions that would prove crucial to my future independence. First, I contacted my former colleagues at Neuralink Dynamics and began exploring opportunities to return to hands-on technology development. The pharmaceutical company that had acquired our startup was launching a new research division focused on AI-driven drug discovery, and they were interested in bringing me back as a senior technical leader. The position would require relocating to Boston, where the new research facility was being established. The salary and equity package were substantial, reflecting the value of my expertise in the competitive biotechnology market. Most importantly, the role would allow me to pursue cutting-edge research that could have genuine impact on medical treatment and patient outcomes. "We'd love to have you lead our machine learning research team," Dr. Amanda Foster, the division's new director, explained during our video conference. "Your work on diagnostic algorithms has been groundbreaking, and we think you could revolutionize how pharmaceutical companies identify and develop new therapeutic compounds." The opportunity was exactly what I had been hoping for, a chance to return to meaningful technical work while building on the reputation I had established in the field. But accepting the position would require ending my marriage and leaving Denver. Decisions I wasn't quite ready to make. I also began consulting with a divorce attorney, though I approached this more cautiously than my other preparations. Margaret Chen, no relation, despite the shared surname, was a highly regarded family law specialist who had handled several high-profile divorces involving wealthy Denver families. Her reputation for discretion and thorough preparation made her an ideal choice for navigating the complex financial and social dynamics of divorcing into the Morrison family. Marriages involving significant wealth and business interests require careful strategic planning, Margaret explained during our initial consultation. The Morrison family will have substantial resources to deploy in any divorce proceedings, and they'll likely try to minimize your financial settlement while protecting their business interests. She reviewed the financial documentation I had compiled, paying particular attention to the evidence of my unpaid consulting contributions to Morrison Capital. This intellectual property exploitation could be a significant factor in settlement negotiations. If we can quantify the value of your contributions, it strengthens your position considerably. Margaret also advised me about the social and professional challenges I would face in divorcing Derek. The Morrison family has extensive connections in Denver's business and social communities. They may attempt to damage your professional reputation or isolate you socially. You'll need to be prepared for a coordinated response. The warning reminded me of Patricia Mitchell's tactics in the original story I had heard about, but it also reinforced my determination to protect my professional interests and personal dignity. I had worked too hard and accomplished too much to allow Derek's family to destroy my reputation simply because I refused to be exploited. As Derek's birthday approached, I made one final preparation that would prove to be the most significant. I contacted our insurance company and reviewed the life insurance policy I had been paying premiums on for the past 8 years. The policy was substantial, $2 million, with Derek as the sole beneficiary. I had purchased it during our engagement as part of what I thought was responsible financial planning for our future together. But as I reviewed the policy documents, I realized that this insurance represented something more than financial protection. It symbolized my investment in a relationship where I had consistently given more than I received. I had been paying premiums to provide financial security for a man who was systematically exploiting my professional expertise while trying to undermine my career. The policy was in my name, paid for with my money, and I had the legal right to modify or cancel it at any time. The knowledge that I controlled this significant financial asset gave me a sense of power that I hadn't experienced in months. During the final week before the party, Derek seemed oblivious to the undercurrents of tension in our relationship. He was focused on the guest list, the catering arrangements, and the various social and professional connections he planned to nurture during the celebration. He spoke about the party as an opportunity to strengthen Morrison Capital's position in Denver's business community, and to celebrate his transition into what he called the most productive phase of my career. This party represents a milestone, he told me one evening, as we reviewed the seating arrangements Eleanor had prepared. 40 is when men really come into their own professionally. I'm positioned to take Morrison Capital to the next level, and this celebration will announce that transition to everyone who matters in Denver. His focus on his own achievements and aspirations, without any acknowledgement of my contributions or career goals, confirmed everything I had learned about the fundamental selfishness of his character. Derek viewed the party as a celebration of his success, with no recognition that much of that success had been built on my unpaid expertise. I made my final decision about the life insurance policy 3 days before the party. During my lunch break, I called the insurance company and initiated the cancellation process. The policy would terminate at midnight on Derek's birthday, exactly when he would be celebrating what he considered his greatest professional triumph. "Are you sure you want to cancel this policy?" the customer service representative asked. "Given the substantial value and the premiums you've paid, you might want to consider other options like reducing the coverage amount or changing the beneficiary." "I'm completely certain," I replied. "I want the policy to be canceled effective immediately at the end of the current coverage period." The cancellation felt symbolic of larger changes I was preparing to make in my life. I was reclaiming financial assets that represented my investment in a relationship that had proven to be fundamentally unequal. More importantly, I was taking concrete steps to protect my interests and assert my independence. The night before Derek's birthday party, I lay awake considering the various scenarios that might unfold during the celebration. I hoped that Derek would use the occasion to publicly acknowledge my contributions to his success and demonstrate genuine respect for my professional accomplishments. I wanted to believe that the man I had married still existed somewhere beneath the entitled, exploitative person he had become. But I was also prepared for the possibility that Derek would continue treating me as an accessory to his success rather than a partner in our relationship. If he used the party to further diminish my professional identity or exploit my expertise for his family's benefit, I was ready to respond decisively. The life insurance cancellation was scheduled to take effect at midnight. The job offer in Boston was waiting for my response. The legal documentation of Derek's intellectual property violations was complete and ready to be filed if necessary. I had created multiple options for asserting my independence and protecting my interests. Most importantly, I had finally recognized my own worth independent of Derek's approval, or the Morrison family's acceptance. The woman who had earned advanced degrees from Stanford, developed revolutionary medical technology, and built substantial personal wealth, didn't need validation from people who couldn't appreciate her accomplishments. Derek's birthday party would be a test, but not the kind he anticipated. Instead of testing my willingness to continue playing the role of the supportive wife, it would test his capacity to treat me with the respect and partnership that any successful marriage requires. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I felt a strange sense of calm about the uncertainty ahead. For the first time in years, I was prepared to prioritize my own interests and protect my professional future, regardless of how Derek or his family responded. Tomorrow would reveal whether our marriage could be salvaged through genuine mutual respect, or whether it was time to walk away from a relationship that had become fundamentally toxic to my personal and professional growth. The morning of Derek's 40th birthday arrived with the crisp clarity of a Denver autumn day, and with it came the final chapter of a marriage that had been slowly dying for months. But I had no idea that Derek's birthday celebration would culminate in a moment of public humiliation so devastating that it would finally give me the clarity and motivation I needed to end our relationship permanently. The word he would use to describe me in front of everyone who mattered to him would be the final insult I needed to walk away forever. The Denver Art Museum's grand ballroom had been transformed into Eleanor Morrison's vision of sophisticated elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in ivory silk, while elaborate floral arrangements of white orchids and deep purple roses created dramatic centerpieces. The guest list read like a directory of Denver's most influential residents, politicians, business leaders, cultural figures, and society luminaries who represented the pinnacle of the city's social hierarchy. I arrived fashionably late, having spent extra time preparing for what I suspected would be a pivotal evening. My dress was a stunning midnight blue silk creation by a designer Eleanor had recommended, elegant enough to meet her exacting standards while making me feel confident and powerful. The diamond earrings I wore were ones I had purchased for myself after the Neuralink Dynamics acquisition, a reminder of my independent success and financial autonomy. Derek was already working the room when I entered, moving effortlessly between clusters of guests with the practiced charm that had first attracted me at that tech conference years ago. He looked handsome in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, every inch the successful venture capitalist celebrating a milestone birthday surrounded by admiring colleagues and friends. Eleanor intercepted me near the entrance, resplendent in a champagne-colored gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her smile was warm but calculating, the expression of a hostess who orchestrated social events like military campaigns. "Rebecca, darling, you look absolutely stunning," she said, air-kissing both my cheeks in the European style she had adopted. "Derek has been waiting for you. There are several important people here tonight who are eager to meet you." The phrasing made me wary. Eleanor's introductions typically served strategic purposes, either advancing Derek's business interests or demonstrating the Morrison family's social connections. I suspected she had planned conversations that would showcase my technical expertise in ways that benefited Morrison Capital. "I'm looking forward to meeting everyone," I replied diplomatically. "This is certainly an impressive gathering." Eleanor beamed with pride. "Only the best for Derek's 40th. This birthday marks the beginning of what I know will be his most successful decade. Morrison Capital is poised for tremendous growth, and Derek is perfectly positioned to lead that expansion." Quote. Her focus on Derek's professional future, without any mention of my own career or accomplishments, was typical of how the Morrison family viewed our marriage. I was expected to be a supportive presence who enhanced Derek's success, rather than pursuing independent achievements. Derek spotted me from across the room and excused himself from a conversation with what appeared to be several prominent businessmen. His face lit up with genuine pleasure as he approached, and for a moment I glimpsed the man I had fallen in love with years earlier. "Becca, You look incredible, he said, taking my hands and kissing my cheek. I was beginning to worry you might not make it. I wouldn't miss your 40th birthday, I assured him, though I didn't add that my reasons for attending were more complex than a simple celebration. Derek guided me toward the bar, his hand resting possessively on the small of my back. There are some people I really want you to meet tonight, potential investors who could benefit from your insights about healthcare technology trends. The familiar expectation that I would provide unpaid consulting services at Derek's social events triggered the frustration I had been suppressing for weeks. Derek, we've discussed this. I'm not comfortable providing informal technical assessments without proper compensation or recognition. His expression flickered with irritation before he composed himself. Becca, these are just conversations, natural discussions about industry trends. You're not writing formal reports or anything. The dismissive tone suggested that Derek still didn't understand, or chose not to understand, why I objected to his exploitation of my expertise. He continued to frame my professional knowledge as something he could access freely, rather than valuable intellectual property that deserved compensation. Before I could respond, a distinguished man in his 60s approached us with an extended hand and a warm smile. Derek, happy birthday, my friend. 40 looks good on you. Senator Bradley, thank you for coming, Derek replied, shaking hands enthusiastically. I'd like you to meet my wife, Rebecca. Becca, this is Senator James Bradley, chair of the Senate Healthcare Committee. Senator Bradley's eyes lit up with interest. Rebecca Morrison! Derek has told me fascinating things about your work in artificial intelligence and medical diagnostics. I understand you're something of an expert in how technology is revolutionizing healthcare delivery. The introduction revealed that Derek had been discussing my expertise with influential political figures, likely positioning himself as having insider access to cutting-edge healthcare technology insights. Once again, he was leveraging my professional knowledge to enhance his own social and business standing. I do work in AI applications for medical diagnostics, I replied carefully. It's an exciting field with tremendous potential for improving patient outcomes. Senator Bradley leaned forward with obvious interest. Fascinating. I'm particularly curious about the regulatory challenges facing AI-driven medical devices. We're working on legislation that could significantly impact how these technologies are approved and implemented. The conversation was precisely the kind of high-level policy discussion that I found intellectually engaging. Healthcare technology regulation was an area where my technical expertise intersected with broader societal implications, and Senator Bradley's questions demonstrated genuine understanding of the complex issues involved. For 20 minutes, we engaged in substantive discussion about artificial intelligence in medicine, regulatory frameworks, and the potential for technology to address healthcare accessibility challenges. Derek contributed occasionally, but it was clear that the conversation was primarily between Senator Bradley and me. Your insights are invaluable, the senator said as our discussion concluded. I hope Derek realizes how fortunate he is to have access to such expertise. Morrison Capital must benefit tremendously from your technical knowledge. The comment confirmed my suspicions about how Derek had framed my expertise in previous conversations. He had positioned my knowledge as an asset that enhanced Morrison Capital's investment capabilities, rather than acknowledging my independent professional accomplishments. Rebecca has her own career in technology development, I said firmly. She's not formally affiliated with Morrison Capital. Derek's expression showed a flash of annoyance at my correction, but he covered it quickly with a smile. Of course, though we certainly benefit from her insights when she's willing to share them. As Senator Bradley moved on to other conversations, Derek's irritation became more apparent. Why did you feel the need to clarify that you don't work for Morrison Capital? He was clearly impressed by our connection to healthcare technology expertise. The word "our" perfectly encapsulated the problem with Derek's perspective. He viewed my expertise as a shared marital asset that he could deploy for his family's business benefit, rather than recognizing it as my personal professional accomplishment. Because I don't work for Morrison Capital, Derek, I have my own career and my own professional identity. I'm not going to pretend otherwise just to enhance your business relationships. Derek's jaw tightened, a sign that his patience with my assertiveness was wearing thin. We're at my birthday party, Becca. Could we please not turn this into another argument about professional boundaries? The conversation was interrupted by Eleanor's voice over the sound system, calling everyone's attention for the evening's formal presentations. The lights dimmed slightly as she took the microphone at the front of the ballroom, looking every inch the society matriarch she had cultivated herself to be. "Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us to celebrate Derek's 40th birthday," Eleanor began, her voice carrying clearly through the elegant space. "This milestone represents not just the passage of time, but the recognition of exceptional achievement and the promise of even greater success ahead." She launched into a detailed recounting of Derek's accomplishments, from his education at prestigious universities to his success at Morrison Capital. Her presentation was masterful, weaving together personal anecdotes and professional achievements to create a portrait of a man destined for continued greatness. "Derek has always possessed the vision and leadership qualities that distinguish truly successful individuals," Eleanor continued. "His work at Morrison Capital has generated exceptional returns for our investors, while identifying innovative companies that are shaping the future of technology and medicine." The subtle reference to medical technology made me uncomfortable, as it clearly alluded to the investment success that Derek had achieved using my unpaid expertise. Eleanor was publicly celebrating accomplishments that had been built partially on my uncredited contributions. As Eleanor's speech continued, I noticed several guests glancing in my direction during mentions of healthcare technology investments and innovations. Derek had apparently discussed my expertise widely enough that many people in the room associated Morrison Capital's success in medical technology with my informal consultations. "Now I'd like to invite Derek to share some thoughts about this important milestone and his vision for the future," Eleanor concluded, handing the microphone to her son with obvious pride. Derek took the microphone with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. His speech began with gracious acknowledgments of the guests and appreciation for their support of Morrison Capital over the years. "Turning 40 feels like reaching the summit of a mountain, only to discover that it's actually just a plateau offering views of even higher peaks ahead," Derek said, his voice carrying the polished cadence of practiced public speaking. "The success we've achieved at Morrison Capital has been built on hard work, strategic thinking, and the ability to identify opportunities that others might overlook." He detailed several recent investment successes, including specific examples of healthcare technology companies that had generated exceptional returns. Each example he cited was a company I had provided technical assessments about, though he described the investment decisions as results of Morrison Capital's sophisticated analytical capabilities. "Our success in the healthcare technology sector has been particularly gratifying," Derek continued, "because these investments represent more than financial returns. They support innovations that improve people's lives and advance medical science." The noble sentiment would have been more compelling if Derek had acknowledged that much of Morrison Capital's healthcare technology success had been built on my unpaid expertise. Instead, he was taking credit for insights that I had provided, while being pressured to abandon my own career. As Derek's speech progressed, he began discussing his vision for Morrison Capital's future expansion and his role in leading the firm into new markets and investment areas. His ambitions were substantial, involving international expansion and significantly increased capital deployment. "The foundation we've built over the past decade positions us perfectly for the challenges and opportunities ahead," Derek said, his voice rising with enthusiasm. "Morrison Capital is ready to become a major player on the national and international investment stage." Quote, "Then Derek did something that caught me completely off guard. He gestured toward me in the audience, drawing everyone's attention in my direction. I'm fortunate to have the support of my brilliant wife, Rebecca, whose insights about technology trends have been invaluable to our investment strategy," he said with a smile that looked genuine but felt calculated. "Her expertise in artificial intelligence and medical technology has helped Morrison Capital identify opportunities that might have escaped notice otherwise." The acknowledgement was simultaneously flattering and infuriating. Derek was finally giving me public credit for contributing to Morrison Capital's success, but he was framing it as spousal support rather than professional expertise that deserved compensation. He was having it both ways, leveraging my knowledge for business success, while maintaining that it was simply wifely assistance rather than valuable consulting work. "Rebecca's willingness to share her technical knowledge has been a tremendous asset for Morrison Capital," Derek continued, and I look forward to continuing to benefit from her insights as we expand into new areas of healthcare technology investment. The phrase willingness to share particularly grated on me. Derek was describing my expertise as something I freely chose to provide, rather than acknowledging that he had systematically extracted it through social manipulation and emotional pressure. The applause that followed Derek's acknowledgement felt hollow to me. The guests were celebrating what they perceived as a supportive marriage, where the wife contributed to her husband's business success. They had no idea that Derek had been exploiting my expertise for years while simultaneously pressuring me to abandon my own career. As Derek concluded his speech and returned to mingling with guests, I found myself surrounded by people wanting to discuss my contributions to Morrison Capital's healthcare technology investments. The conversations were flattering but deeply uncomfortable, as they reinforced the narrative that my primary value lay in supporting Derek's business rather than pursuing my own professional goals. Your husband is incredibly fortunate to have such technical expertise available for his investment decisions, commented Patricia Whitfield, the wife of a prominent real estate developer. You must feel so satisfied, knowing that your knowledge is helping generate such impressive returns. Quote, the comment crystallized everything that was wrong with how people perceived my situation. They saw my contributions to Morrison Capital as fulfilling wifely duties rather than recognizing that I was providing valuable professional services without compensation or formal recognition. Actually, I have my own career in technology development, I replied, echoing my earlier correction to Senator Bradley. My work at Morrison Capital is informal and unpaid. Patricia looked confused by my clarification. Oh, but surely the family benefits make up for any formal compensation. Being part of such a successful firm must provide wonderful opportunities. The assumption that I should be satisfied with indirect benefits rather than direct compensation for my expertise reflected the same attitude that Derek and his family had displayed throughout our marriage. My professional knowledge was viewed as a marital asset that naturally belonged to the Morrison family, rather than recognizing it as my personal intellectual property. As the evening progressed, I found myself growing increasingly frustrated with the narrative that Derek had constructed around my contributions to his success. He had managed to publicly acknowledge my expertise while simultaneously reinforcing the perception that it was simply spousal support rather than valuable professional consulting that deserved fair compensation. The final straw came during the dinner portion of the evening. I was seated at the head table next to Derek, surrounded by Morrison Capital's most important clients and business partners. The conversation naturally turned to investment strategies and market opportunities, with several people asking detailed questions about healthcare technology trends. Derek encouraged me to share my insights, presenting my responses as informal dinner conversation rather than the sophisticated technical analysis they actually represented. Each answer I provided gave Morrison Capital's clients valuable intelligence about emerging market opportunities, but Derek framed it as his wife sharing interesting observations rather than acknowledging that they were receiving professional consulting insights. Rebecca has such a fascinating perspective on how artificial intelligence will transform medical diagnostics, Derek said to the table. Her technical background gives her insights that most investors never access. The praise felt manipulative rather than appreciative. Derek was simultaneously celebrating my expertise and minimizing its professional significance, getting credit for having access to valuable technical knowledge while avoiding any obligation to compensate me fairly for providing it. But the moment that would change everything was still ahead, waiting in a conversation that would finally reveal exactly what Derek thought of me when he believed his carefully maintained facade was safe. The word he would use to describe me would be so devastating, so publicly humiliating, that it would give me all the clarity I needed to end our marriage permanently and reclaim my professional independence. The moment that would shatter my marriage came not during the formal speeches or planned presentations, but in the unguarded conversation that followed the elaborate dinner service. The guests had moved into the museum's sculpture gallery for coffee and after-dinner drinks, creating smaller, intimate groupings where the real business of networking and relationship building took place. I was standing near a contemporary bronze sculpture, taking a brief respite from the social performance that such events required, when I overheard Derek's voice from the adjacent alcove. He was speaking with William Morrison and two other men I recognized as major Morrison Capital investors, Charles Brennan, who owned a chain of luxury hotels, and Dr. Richard Ashford, a prominent surgeon who had invested substantial personal wealth with the firm. The tone of their conversation was different from the polished public discussions that had dominated the earlier part of the evening. This was the kind of frank business talk that men like Derek engaged in when they believed they were among trusted allies, away from the wives and social obligations that required careful diplomatic language. The healthcare technology sector has been incredibly lucrative for us, Derek was saying, his voice carrying the confident satisfaction of someone discussing a particularly successful strategy. Our returns in that area have outperformed every other segment of our portfolio by significant margins. Charles Brennan's response was impressive and curious. Your timing on those investments has been remarkable. You seem to have an uncanny ability to identify the winners before they become obvious to the broader market. I moved slightly closer to the alcove, positioning myself behind a large marble sculpture where I could hear clearly without being seen. Something about Derek's tone suggested this conversation would reveal more than his usual careful public statements about Morrison Capital's investment strategy. The secret, Derek said with a laugh that contained an edge of smugness, is having access to inside technical expertise. My wife Rebecca is something of a savant when it comes to artificial intelligence and medical technology. She can spot promising innovations and identify potential problems before they become apparent to traditional financial analysis. Dr. Ashford's voice showed genuine interest. She must be remarkably sophisticated in her understanding of these technologies. The question she was asking Senator Bradley earlier demonstrated an unusual depth of knowledge. Oh, she's brilliant technically, Derek replied, and I could hear the subtle shift in his tone that I had learned to recognize over 3 years of marriage. It was the voice he used when discussing something he found both useful and slightly irritating. Sometimes I think she's too smart for her own good, you know. She gets so wrapped up in the technical details that she loses sight of the bigger picture. William Morrison's chuckle was knowing and condescending. Technical people often have that problem. They understand the mechanics but miss the strategic implications. That's why they need business people to guide their expertise toward practical applications. The conversation was becoming increasingly uncomfortable to listen to, as Derek and his father discussed my expertise as if I were a useful but limited resource that required their guidance to be truly valuable. But what came next was far worse than anything I had expected. The challenge, Derek continued, his voice taking on the tone he used when sharing confidential business insights, is managing Rebecca's expectations about her role in our success. She's developed some unrealistic ideas about compensation and recognition for what are really just informal conversations at social events. Charles Brennan's response was sympathetic. Ah, the modern career woman problem. They want credit for everything, even casual contributions to their husband's business success. Exactly, Derek said, and I could hear the frustration he had been suppressing during our recent arguments about professional boundaries. Rebecca has convinced herself that her informal technical assessments deserve formal consulting fees and recognition. She doesn't understand that marriage is supposed to be a partnership where both spouses contribute to the family's success without keeping score. Dr. Ashford's voice carried the authoritative tone of someone accustomed to making pronouncements about complex situations. It sounds like she's lost perspective about the nature of marriage and professional responsibilities. Some women get confused about where their personal identity ends, and their role as supportive wives begins. The conversation was becoming more offensive with each exchange, but I remained frozen in place, unable to move away from what felt like a horrifying revelation of how Derek truly viewed our relationship and my contributions to his success. The irony, Derek continued, his voice warming to a theme he had clearly discussed before, is that Rebecca's technical expertise is only valuable because Morrison Capital has the business connections and investment resources to act on it. Her insights would be worthless without our ability to translate them into actual financial opportunities. William Morrison's agreement was immediate and emphatic. Technical knowledge without business acumen is just academic theory. She should be grateful that you're able to give her insights practical application and real-world impact. The reframing of my expertise as dependent on Morrison Capital's resources was breathtaking in its audacity. Derek was arguing that my professional knowledge only had value because his family's business could exploit it, rather than acknowledging that my technical insights were inherently valuable and had generated substantial profits for their firm. "But here's the real problem," Derek said, his voice dropping to the conspiratorial tone that men used when sharing what they considered private truths about their wives. "Rebecca has become increasingly difficult about contributing to family success. She's more focused on her individual career ambitions than on supporting our partnership." Charles Brennan's response was knowing and dismissive. Career women often struggle with understanding that marriage requires compromise. They want all the benefits of partnership without the obligations that come with being part of a successful family. The conversation was revealing attitudes that I had suspected but never heard articulated so explicitly. Derek and his business associates viewed my career ambitions as selfish indulgences that interfered with my real obligations as Derek's wife and a member of the Morrison family. "The truth is," Derek continued, his voice taking on the exasperated tone of someone discussing a persistent annoyance, "Rebecca's behavior has become increasingly problematic. She refuses to attend important business events, won't provide technical assessments when we need them, and acts like her individual achievements are more important than our family's success." Dr. Ashford's response carried the judgmental authority of someone who believed he understood the proper dynamics of successful marriages. "It sounds like she's forgotten that her primary role should be supporting your career and the family business. Individual ambition has its place, but not when it conflicts with family obligations." I was listening to a conversation that revealed the fundamental contempt Derek felt for my professional independence and personal autonomy. He wasn't just frustrated with my recent assertiveness. He was genuinely angry that I had developed expectations about fair compensation and recognition for my expertise. "The most frustrating part," Derek said, his voice rising slightly with what I recognized as the anger he usually kept carefully controlled, "is how ungrateful she's become. Morrison Capital has made millions of dollars, partly because of her informal technical insights, but instead of appreciating how that benefits our family, she acts like we owe her something." William Morrison's laugh was harsh and dismissive. "Entitlement is a terrible thing in a wife. She should understand that her expertise only has value because of the Morrison family's business success and social connections." The conversation continued in this vein for several more minutes, with Derek and his associates trading increasingly offensive observations about my supposed ingratitude and unrealistic expectations. They discussed my professional accomplishments as if they were hobbies that had gotten out of hand, my technical expertise as if it were a useful but limited resource that required their guidance to be valuable. But the moment that would end my marriage forever came when Charles Brennan asked Derek a direct question about my future role in Morrison Capital's healthcare technology investments. "Given Rebecca's obvious expertise, have you considered making her contributions to Morrison Capital more formal?" Brennan asked. "It might address some of her concerns about recognition while ensuring continued access to her technical insights." Derek's response was immediate and devastating. "Honestly, Charles, I think Rebecca has lost sight of what's really important. She's become so focused on her individual career and getting credit for every contribution that she's forgotten what marriage is supposed to be about. Her behavior has become increasingly—" He paused, searching for the right word, and when he found it, it hit me like a physical blow. "Pathetic." The word hung in the air like a poison cloud, confirming everything I had begun to suspect about Derek's true feelings toward me and my career. In that single syllable, he had revealed his complete lack of respect for my professional accomplishments, my personal autonomy, and my worth as an equal partner in our marriage. "She's become pathetic in her demands for recognition and compensation," Derek continued, apparently warming to his theme. "Acting like a victim when she should be grateful for the opportunities Morrison Capital has provided. The whole situation has become embarrassing, frankly." Dr. Ashford's murmur of agreement was sympathetic and knowing. "It's unfortunate when intelligent women lose perspective about their proper role in supporting their husband's success. Professional ambition can be attractive initially, but it becomes problematic when it conflicts with family obligations." The conversation continued, but I had heard enough. The word pathetic echoed in my mind as I quietly moved away from the alcove, my heart pounding with a combination of rage, humiliation, and crystalline clarity about what I needed to do. Derek had called me pathetic, not in a moment of anger during a private argument, but in a calculated conversation with business associates, where he was explaining why my expertise was valuable, but my expectations for fair treatment were unreasonable. He had used that word to describe the woman who had contributed millions of dollars to his family's business success while being pressured to abandon her own career. I walked mechanically toward the museum's restroom, needing privacy to process what I had just heard. The elegant bathroom was mercifully empty, and I stared at my reflection in the ornate mirror, seeing a woman who had been systematically diminished and exploited by the man she had trusted with her heart and her future. The woman looking back at me was not pathetic. She was accomplished, intelligent, financially independent, and professionally respected in her field. She had developed technology that saved lives, built substantial personal wealth through smart investments, and earned recognition from peers and colleagues who understood the value of her contributions. But the man she had married viewed her as pathetic for expecting fair treatment and professional respect. Derek saw my expertise as a resource he was entitled to exploit, and my expectations for equal partnership as unreasonable demands that interfered with his family's success. Standing in that museum bathroom, I made the decision that would change the trajectory of my life forever. I wasn't going to spend another day being married to a man who considered me pathetic for refusing to be exploited. I wasn't going to continue providing unpaid expertise to a family business that viewed my contributions as spousal obligations, rather than valuable professional services. Most importantly, I was done hoping that Derek would recognize my worth and treat me as an equal partner. He had revealed his true feelings about me and our marriage in that conversation, and no amount of discussion or compromise would change the fundamental contempt he felt for my professional independence. I pulled out my phone and checked the time. It was 11:47 p.m. on Derek's 40th birthday. In 13 minutes, the life insurance policy I had canceled would officially terminate, ending the financial protection I had been providing for a man who thought I was pathetic. I typed a quick text message to Dr. Amanda Foster in Boston. I accept the position. When can I start? Her response came back within minutes. Despite the late hour. Fantastic! We can have you here by the end of the month if that works. Welcome to the team. The job offer represented more than just a career opportunity. It was my escape route from a marriage that had become toxic to my personal and professional growth. I would be moving to Boston to lead cutting-edge research that could revolutionize pharmaceutical development, working with brilliant colleagues who would value my expertise rather than exploit it. I composed a second text message, this one to Dr. Sarah Martinez, my intellectual property attorney. Please proceed with documenting the unauthorized use of my expertise by Morrison Capital. I want a full accounting of the profits they've generated from my unpaid consultations. Quote, the legal action would ensure that Derek and his family faced consequences for exploiting my professional knowledge without compensation or recognition. They had treated my expertise as a free resource that they were entitled to access, but I was going to make sure they understood the true financial value of what they had taken. As I prepared to return to the party, I realized that Derek's birthday celebration had become something entirely different from what Eleanor had planned. Instead of marking Derek's professional success and bright future, it had become the night when his marriage ended and his access to my valuable expertise terminated permanently. The woman Derek had called pathetic was about to demonstrate exactly how wrong he was about her worth and her capacity for independent success. But first, I needed to return to the party and let Derek know that I had heard every word of his devastating assessment of our marriage. The confrontation that would end our relationship was only minutes away, and this time, I would be the one delivering the final, devastating blow that would leave Derek understanding exactly what he had lost through his arrogance and exploitation. I returned to the party with a calm that surprised me. The rage and humiliation I had felt in the bathroom had crystallized into something far more powerful, absolute clarity about my worth and my future. The woman Derek had called pathetic was about to demonstrate just how profoundly he had misjudged both my character and my capabilities. Derek was still in the sculpture gallery, having moved on from his devastating conversation with his business associates to charm a group of potential investors. His face lit up when he saw me approaching, the practiced smile of a man who had no idea that his marriage had just ended. "There you are, sweetheart," he said, reaching for my hand with the possessive gesture I had once found endearing. I was just telling the Hendersons about your fascinating work in medical AI. They're very interested in hearing your thoughts on the future of diagnostic technology. Margaret Henderson, the wife of a prominent oil executive, nodded enthusiastically. Derek says you're quite the expert. We'd love to hear your perspective on how artificial intelligence might transform healthcare in the coming decades. Quote, the request was exactly the kind of informal consultation that Derek had been exploiting for years, and I could see the expectation in his eyes that I would comply as I always had before. He had no idea that everything had changed in the 13 minutes I had spent processing his true opinion of me and our marriage. Actually, I said with a serene smile, I no longer provide informal technical consulting. If you're interested in professional insights about healthcare technology trends, I'd be happy to refer you to several excellent consulting firms that specialize in that area. Derek's expression flickered with confusion and irritation. Becca, the Hendersons are friends. Surely you can share some general thoughts about industry developments. I can certainly recommend some excellent resources for obtaining that information, I replied pleasantly. But I've decided that my technical expertise is too valuable to give away casually at social events. The word valuable was chosen deliberately, a direct contrast to Derek's assessment of my contributions as pathetic demands for recognition. Margaret Henderson looked puzzled by the exchange, clearly not understanding the undercurrents of tension between Derek and me. Of course, dear, Margaret said diplomatically. Perhaps we could arrange a more formal consultation if we decide to explore investment opportunities in healthcare technology. That would be wonderful, I agreed. My standard consulting rate is $500 per hour, with a minimum engagement of 10 hours for comprehensive industry analysis. Derek's face flushed with embarrassment and anger at my public assertion of professional boundaries. He had built his social relationships on the assumption that he could provide access to my expertise, and I was undermining that foundation in front of important business contacts. Becca, could I speak with you privately for a moment? Derek asked, his voice tight with controlled fury. Of course, I replied, maintaining the calm demeanor that I knew would frustrate him more than an emotional outburst. Derek guided me toward a quiet corner of the gallery, his grip on my elbow slightly too firm to be entirely polite. Once we were away from the other guests, his composure cracked completely. What the hell is wrong with you? He hissed, keeping his voice low but unable to disguise his anger. You just embarrassed me in front of the Hendersons, who are major Morrison Capital investors. Why are you acting like this? I'm acting like a professional who understands the value of her expertise, I replied calmly, something I should have done years ago. Derek's eyes narrowed as he studied my expression, perhaps recognizing for the first time that something fundamental had shifted in my attitude. This is about our conversation earlier, isn't it? You're upset because I mentioned your contributions to Morrison Capital's success. The irony of his interpretation was almost amusing. Derek thought I was angry about being acknowledged, when in reality, I was furious about being called pathetic for expecting fair treatment. He still had no idea that I had overheard his private conversation. I heard you, Derek, I said quietly. I heard everything you said to your father, and Charles Brennan, and Dr. Ashford. Every word about how pathetic I've become in my demands for recognition and compensation. The color drained from Derek's face as he realized the implications of my statement. He understood immediately that I had been listening to a conversation where he had revealed his true feelings about me and our marriage. Feelings that contradicted everything he had said publicly about valuing my contributions. Becca, you misunderstood what you heard, he said desperately, his voice taking on the pleading tone he used when trying to talk his way out of difficult situations. I was just venting some frustration with the guys. You know how these business conversations go? People say things they don't really mean. Oh, I think you meant exactly what you said, I replied. You think I'm pathetic for expecting fair compensation for expertise that has generated millions of dollars in profits for your family's business. You think my professional accomplishments are less important than my obligations as your supportive wife. Derek looked around nervously, aware that other guests might overhear our conversation if it escalated. Can we please discuss this at home? This isn't the time or place for a marital argument. You're absolutely right, I agreed. This isn't the time or place for a marital argument. It's the time and place for me to inform you that our marriage is over. The statement hung between us like a physical barrier, clear and irrevocable. Derek stared at me in shock, apparently unable to process that I was serious about ending our relationship. "You can't be serious," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're going to destroy our marriage because of something you overheard at a party? Because I was frustrated and said something I didn't mean?" "I'm ending our marriage because you called the woman who has supported your career for 3 years pathetic for expecting basic professional respect," I corrected. "Because you've been systematically exploiting my expertise while pressuring me to abandon my own career. Because you fundamentally don't understand what partnership means." Derek's desperation was becoming more apparent as he realized that his usual combination of charm and manipulation wasn't working. "Becca, please. We can work through this. I'll make changes. I'll ensure that Morrison Capital compensates you fairly for any future consultations." "Future consultations?" I laughed softly. "Derek, there won't be any future consultations. I'm accepting a position in Boston leading AI research for pharmaceutical development. I'll be leaving Denver within the month." The revelation that I had already secured a new position clearly shocked Derek, who had apparently assumed that I was dependent on his support and unwilling to make dramatic changes to my life. His expression shifted from desperation to calculation as he processed the implications of my announcement. "You're making a terrible mistake," he said, his voice hardening with the authoritative tone he used when he believed he was delivering unwelcome but necessary truths. "You're throwing away everything we've built together because of a momentary disagreement. Do you have any idea what you're giving up?" "I'm giving up a marriage where my husband considers me pathetic for refusing to be exploited," I replied. "And I'm gaining the opportunity to pursue meaningful work with colleagues who will value my expertise rather than taking it for granted." Derek's face contorted with frustration and wounded pride. "Fine. If you want to throw away our marriage for some academic research position, that's your choice. But don't expect Morrison Capital to continue supporting your unrealistic expectations about compensation for casual conversations." The threat was empty and petty, revealing Derek's inability to understand that I no longer needed or wanted anything from his family's business. He was still thinking in terms of leverage and negotiation, unable to accept that I was walking away completely. "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone to check the time, "there's something you should know about casual conversations and their financial consequences." It was 11:59 p.m. on Derek's 40th birthday. In 1 minute, the life insurance policy I had been paying for 8 years would terminate, ending the $2 million in coverage that would have provided for Derek if anything happened to me. "I called the insurance company 3 days ago and canceled your life insurance policy," I said, watching Derek's expression change as he processed this information. "The coverage ends at midnight tonight. Consider it my birthday gift to you, freedom from any financial dependence on the woman you consider pathetic." Derek's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, a kind of panicked understanding of what I was telling him. The life insurance policy represented substantial financial security, and its cancellation was concrete evidence that I was serious about ending our relationship. "You can't do that," he said, though we both knew that I absolutely could. "That policy is part of our financial planning. You're being vindictive and irrational." "I'm being practical," I corrected. "Why would I continue paying premiums to provide financial security for a man who thinks I'm pathetic for expecting basic respect?" At that moment, my phone chimed with a text message. I glanced at it and smiled. It was an automated notification from the insurance company confirming that the policy had been canceled at midnight. "And there it is," I said, showing Derek the message. "No more life insurance. No more unpaid consulting. No more supporting a family business that views my expertise as an entitlement rather than a valuable service." Derek stared at the phone screen as if he could make the message disappear. The cancellation of the life insurance policy seemed to represent something larger to him. Concrete proof that the woman he had taken for granted was capable of making decisions that directly affected his financial security. "Becca, you're not thinking clearly," he said, his voice taking on the patronizing tone he used when he believed I was being emotional rather than rational. "You're upset about something you misinterpreted, and you're making permanent decisions based on temporary feelings." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years," I replied. The woman you called pathetic has been subsidizing your success while being pressured to abandon her own career. That ends tonight." Eleanor Morrison appeared at that moment, approaching us with the sharp instincts of a hostess who sensed drama developing among her guests. Her expression was concerned but controlled, the look of someone accustomed to managing social crises before they became public spectacles. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her voice carrying the authority of someone who expected immediate compliance with her wishes. "You both look rather serious for such a festive occasion." "Everything is perfect, Eleanor," I said with genuine warmth. "I was just telling Derek about some exciting career developments. I have accepted a position in Boston leading AI research for pharmaceutical development." Eleanor's expression shifted to polite confusion. "How wonderful, dear. Though I hope this doesn't mean you'll be leaving Denver permanently." "Actually, it does," I replied. "I'll be relocating within the month. Derek and I have decided to end our marriage so that I can pursue this incredible opportunity without any conflicts of interest regarding Morrison Capital's healthcare technology investments." The announcement was delivered with such calm professionalism that Eleanor needed a moment to process what I was actually saying. When she realized that I had just announced the end of my marriage as if it were a routine business decision, her composure finally cracked. "Surely you're not serious," she said, her voice rising slightly with alarm. "You can't end a marriage over a career opportunity. There must be ways to manage both your professional interests and your family obligations." "My family obligations," I repeated thoughtfully. "You mean my obligation to provide unpaid technical consulting to Morrison Capital while being called pathetic for expecting fair compensation?" Eleanor's face flushed with anger and embarrassment as she realized that I was publicly discussing family business in terms that made the Morrison family look exploitative and unreasonable. Her carefully maintained social facade was being challenged by a daughter-in-law who was no longer willing to play by the unspoken rules of wealthy family dynamics. "Rebecca, you're creating a scene," Eleanor said, her voice tight with disapproval. "This is neither the time nor the place for such dramatic announcements." "You're absolutely right," I agreed. "This is Derek's birthday celebration, and I don't want to spoil it with unpleasant discussions about the end of our marriage." I turned to Derek, who had been listening to this exchange with growing horror as he realized that I was publicly dismantling the narrative of successful family partnership that he had built his social relationships on. "Derek, thank you for 3 years of marriage," I said formally. "I've learned valuable lessons about recognizing my own worth and protecting my professional interests. I hope you've learned something as well." Before either Derek or Eleanor could respond, I walked away from them toward the museum's exit. Several guests noticed my departure, and I could hear the murmur of confused conversations beginning behind me as people tried to understand what they had just witnessed. At the museum entrance, I handed my valet ticket to the attendant and waited for my car to be brought around. The Denver night was crisp and clear, with stars visible despite the city lights, a perfect backdrop for the beginning of my new life. As I drove home through the quiet streets, I felt a sense of liberation that I hadn't experienced in years. The woman Derek had called pathetic was actually an accomplished professional, with substantial personal wealth, valuable expertise, and the courage to walk away from a marriage that had become toxic to her growth and happiness. Over the following weeks, I methodically dismantled the life I had built with Derek. The Madison Park house went on the market, and I moved into a temporary corporate apartment while preparing for my relocation to Boston. Dr. Sarah Martinez filed a comprehensive lawsuit against Morrison Capital for unauthorized use of my intellectual property, seeking damages based on the profits they had generated from my unpaid consultations. The legal action created a significant scandal in Denver's business community, as details of Derek's systematic exploitation of my expertise became public record. Morrison Capital's reputation suffered serious damage, and several investors withdrew their funds rather than be associated with a firm that had built part of its success on unpaid intellectual property theft. Derek attempted to contact me repeatedly during this period, alternating between apologies, threats, and desperate attempts at reconciliation. I ignored all of his communications, forwarding them to Margaret Chen, my divorce attorney, who incorporated them into our documentation of his manipulative behavior patterns. The divorce settlement was finalized within 3 months, thanks to the ironclad prenuptial agreement that Eleanor had insisted upon. The intellectual property lawsuit was settled out of court for $8 million, representing Morrison Capital's acknowledgement that they had inappropriately profited from my expertise without compensation. By spring, I was established in Boston, leading a team of brilliant researchers in developing AI algorithms that could revolutionize pharmaceutical discovery. The work was intellectually challenging and personally fulfilling in ways that I had almost forgotten were possible. My colleagues valued my expertise, respected my leadership, and collaborated with me as an equal partner in advancing medical science. 6 months after Derek's birthday party, I received a wedding announcement in the mail. Derek had married his secretary, a young woman named Ashley who had no technical expertise or professional accomplishments that might interfere with her role as a supportive wife. Eleanor had apparently found the perfect daughter-in-law, someone who would enhance Derek's image without challenging the family's business practices or expecting fair compensation for her contributions. I felt no sadness about Derek's remarriage, only gratitude that I had found the courage to leave before wasting more years of my life trying to make an impossible relationship work. The woman he had called pathetic was thriving in Boston, leading groundbreaking research and building a life based on mutual respect and professional fulfillment. The insurance policy I had canceled on Derek's birthday was replaced with a new policy that named my research foundation as the beneficiary. If anything happened to me, my wealth would support young women pursuing careers in technology and medical research, women who would never have to choose between their professional aspirations and their personal relationships. Looking back now, I can see that Derek's birthday party was the best thing that ever happened to me. His casual cruelty in calling me pathetic finally gave me the clarity I needed to recognize my own worth and take action to protect it. The man who thought I was pathetic for demanding respect had actually been married to a woman whose expertise, courage, and financial independence would ultimately prove far more valuable than his family's inherited wealth and social connections. The pathetic one, it turned out, was the man who was so insecure about his own accomplishments that he had to exploit his wife's expertise while simultaneously diminishing her professional identity. Derek Morrison had lost a brilliant, accomplished woman who had supported his career for years, and in return, he had gained exactly what he deserved: a relationship based on traditional gender roles and unchallenging companionship. As for me, I had gained something infinitely more valuable: the knowledge that I was worth far more than anyone who would call me pathetic could ever understand. And that knowledge, once gained, could never be taken away from me again. The first year in Boston exceeded every expectation I had harbored about returning to meaningful work. My research team consisted of 8 brilliant scientists from diverse backgrounds: molecular biologists, computer scientists, chemists, and medical doctors, who had all chosen to pursue the intersection of artificial intelligence and pharmaceutical development. Unlike the social dynamics I had endured in Denver, these colleagues evaluated ideas based solely on scientific merit and potential impact. Dr. Amanda Foster proved to be an exceptional leader who understood how to cultivate innovation while maintaining rigorous standards. During our weekly team meetings, she encouraged bold thinking and constructive debate, creating an environment where breakthrough discoveries could emerge from collaborative effort rather than hierarchical mandates. Rebecca, your algorithm for predicting molecular interactions has exceeded our most optimistic projections, Amanda announced during one particularly memorable team meeting. The pharmaceutical companies we're partnering with are reporting drug discovery timelines that are 30% faster than traditional methods. The recognition felt fundamentally different from the hollow praise Derek used to offer about my helpful insights. Amanda was acknowledging specific technical achievements that had a measurable impact on advancing medical science. My work was saving pharmaceutical companies millions of dollars in research costs, while accelerating the development of treatments that could help patients worldwide. More importantly, the financial rewards of my Boston position reflected the true value of my expertise. My salary was nearly double what I had earned at Neuralink Dynamics, with equity participation that would grow substantially as our research division achieved its commercial milestones. The compensation package included research funding that allowed me to pursue innovative projects without the constant pressure of justifying expenses to cost-conscious administrators. But the most satisfying aspect of my new career was the intellectual freedom to explore questions that genuinely intrigued me. At Morrison Capital social events, I had been expected to provide quick assessments of startup business models and market potential. In Boston, I could spend months developing sophisticated algorithms that might revolutionize how pharmaceutical companies identified promising therapeutic compounds. The research foundation I established with part of my Morrison Capital settlement became another source of deep satisfaction. Rather than simply writing checks to existing organizations, I created a program that provided comprehensive support for young women pursuing advanced degrees in computational biology, artificial intelligence, and related fields that combine technology with medical applications. Each year, the foundation awarded 10 full scholarships that covered not only tuition and living expenses, but also research funding and mentorship from established professionals in the field. The recipients were brilliant young women from diverse backgrounds who shared my passion for using technology to solve important medical problems. Dr. Chen, receiving this scholarship has completely changed my trajectory, wrote Maria Santos, a third-year doctoral candidate whose research focused on using machine learning to predict adverse drug reactions. Without the financial support and mentorship, I would have been forced to abandon my research and take a traditional industry position. Reading letters like Maria's reminded me why Derek's exploitation had been so damaging. He had reduced my expertise to a business asset that could enhance Morrison Capital's investment returns, while I viewed technology as a tool for advancing human welfare and scientific understanding. The fundamental difference in our values had made our marriage incompatible from the beginning. The intellectual property lawsuit against Morrison Capital continued to generate ripple effects throughout Denver's business community long after the settlement was finalized. Dr. Sarah Martinez had documented over 40 instances where Morrison Capital had used my informal technical assessments to make investment decisions, creating a pattern of systematic intellectual property appropriation that had generated substantial profits for Derek's family. Your case has become a landmark precedent for protecting informal intellectual contributions, Dr. Martinez explained during one of our final legal consultations. Other professionals who have been similarly exploited are now pursuing claims based on the legal framework we established. The lawsuit had broader implications beyond my personal situation. It forced Denver's business community to confront uncomfortable questions about how intellectual contributions were valued and compensated, particularly when those contributions came from spouses or family members, rather than formal business relationships. Morrison Capital's reputation never fully recovered from the scandal. Several major investors withdrew their funds, citing concerns about the firm's ethical practices and legal vulnerabilities. William Morrison was forced to step down as chairman, and Derek's role in the company was significantly reduced as the family struggled to rebuild their credibility with clients and partners. The scandal also affected Derek's social standing in ways that I learned about through mutual acquaintances who maintained contact despite my relocation. His marriage to Ashley provided temporary distraction from the professional difficulties, but friends reported that he seemed diminished by the loss of status and respect that had accompanied the intellectual property revelations. Derek used to be one of the most sought-after guests at charity events and business gatherings, confided Janet Walsh, a mutual friend who visited Boston for a medical conference. Now people are polite but distant. The whole Morrison family has become somewhat socially isolated. I felt no satisfaction in Derek's difficulties, only sadness that he had chosen exploitation over partnership in our marriage. Had he approached our relationship with genuine respect for my expertise and autonomy, we might have built something extraordinary together. Instead, his need to maintain control and superiority had destroyed both our marriage and his professional reputation. The contrast between Derek's diminished circumstances and my thriving career highlighted the different trajectories that emerged from our divorce. While he struggled to rebuild his family's business reputation, I was establishing myself as a leading researcher in an emerging field with enormous potential for positive impact. My work caught the attention of federal agencies responsible for medical research funding, leading to invitations to serve on advisory panels that shaped national science policy. The National Institutes of Health appointed me to a committee evaluating artificial intelligence applications in drug discovery, where my technical expertise informed decisions about allocating hundreds of millions of dollars in research grants. Dr. Chen's insights have been invaluable in helping us understand how AI technologies can accelerate medical research while maintaining rigorous safety standards, commented Dr. Robert Hayes, the NIH director who chaired our advisory committee. Her practical experience developing these systems gives her a unique perspective on both the opportunities and challenges ahead. The recognition from respected scientific institutions validated my decision to prioritize professional growth over maintaining a marriage that stifled my potential. Derek had viewed my expertise as a resource to be exploited for his family's benefit, while the scientific community recognized it as a valuable contribution to advancing human knowledge and welfare. Personal relationships in Boston developed naturally around shared intellectual interests rather than social climbing or business networking. I joined a hiking group that included professors from MIT and Harvard, participated in a book club focused on science fiction literature, and volunteered with organizations that promoted STEM education for underserved communities. These friendships were refreshingly different from the calculated social connections that had dominated my life in Denver. People were genuinely interested in ideas, experiences, and personal growth rather than using relationships to advance their status or accumulate influence within elite social circles. Dating remained complicated for the first 2 years after my divorce, partly because I was focused on establishing my career, and partly because I remained wary of men who might view my success as either threatening or exploitable. The few relationships I pursued were brief and unsatisfying, lacking the intellectual partnership and mutual respect that I had learned to value above superficial attraction or social compatibility. That changed when I met Dr. James Rodriguez at a conference on computational biology applications in personalized medicine. James was a physician scientist who had transitioned from practicing emergency medicine to researching how artificial intelligence could improve diagnostic accuracy in high-pressure clinical environments. Our initial conversations were purely professional, focused on technical challenges and research methodologies, but I was impressed by his genuine curiosity about my work and his thoughtful questions about algorithmic approaches to medical problems. Unlike Derek, who had viewed my expertise as a business asset, James appreciated the intellectual elegance of the solutions I developed and their potential for improving patient care. Your pattern recognition algorithms could revolutionize how we approach differential diagnoses in emergency settings, James said during one of our early conversations. The ability to quickly identify subtle indicators that human physicians might miss could save thousands of lives annually. The relationship developed slowly and naturally over months of professional collaboration and personal friendship. James understood the demands of scientific research because he faced similar challenges in his own work. He celebrated my achievements without feeling threatened by my success, and he offered thoughtful support during difficult periods without trying to solve my problems for me. Most importantly, James viewed our relationship as a partnership between equals, rather than an opportunity for him to access my expertise or enhance his own career prospects. He had his own professional accomplishments and research interests that were complementary to but independent from my work. When James proposed after 18 months of dating, the conversation was entirely different from Derek's calculated romantic gesture in Carmel. We discussed our shared values, our individual career goals, and how we could support each other's professional development while building a life together based on mutual respect and genuine partnership. I want to marry you because you're brilliant, ambitious, and completely committed to making the world better through your work, James said simply. I want to be part of your life, not change it or control it. The wedding ceremony was small and intimate, held in a botanical garden overlooking Boston Harbor, with only close friends and family in attendance. My parents traveled from Portland, beaming with pride at their daughter's second chance at happiness, with a man who clearly valued her intelligence and independence. Eleanor Morrison was not invited, though I heard through mutual connections that she had made pointed comments about my abandonment of family obligations in favor of, quote, career obsessions. Her disapproval only confirmed that I had made the right choice in prioritizing my own growth over maintaining relationships with people who viewed my success as somehow inappropriate or threatening. The foundation continued to expand its impact, funding research projects and supporting young women who were developing innovative approaches to medical challenges. Each year's cohort of scholarship recipients represented diverse perspectives and backgrounds, but they shared a common commitment to using technology for positive social impact. The foundation isn't just providing financial support, reflected Dr. Lisa Thompson, a former recipient who had become a successful researcher in her own right. It's creating a community of women who understand that scientific achievement and personal fulfillment aren't mutually exclusive. 5 years after Derek's birthday party, I received an unexpected invitation to speak at a Denver conference on healthcare innovation. The event organizers were unaware of my history with the Morrison family, having invited me based solely on my research accomplishments and national reputation in the field. I accepted the invitation, curious to see how Denver's business community had evolved and confident enough in my achievements to return without anxiety about encountering Derek or his associates. The woman who had once felt diminished by their opinions now understood that their approval was irrelevant to her worth or success. The conference was held at the same Denver Art Museum where Derek's birthday party had taken place, creating an ironic symmetry that I found more amusing than distressing. As I delivered my keynote presentation about artificial intelligence in pharmaceutical development, I could see several familiar faces in the audience, business leaders and medical professionals who had attended that fateful birthday celebration years earlier. Their attention was respectful and engaged, focused on the groundbreaking research I was describing rather than my role as someone's wife or family member. I had returned to Denver as Dr. Rebecca Chen, a nationally recognized scientist whose work was advancing medical care for millions of patients, rather than Mrs. Derek Morrison, whose primary identity had been defined by her husband's social connections. During the reception following my presentation, several attendees approached me with questions about potential collaboration opportunities and research partnerships. The conversations were sophisticated and substantive, treating me as the expert I had always been, rather than as an accessory to someone else's success. Dr. Chen, your research on predictive algorithms could have tremendous applications for our hospital system, commented Dr. Sarah Williams, Chief Medical Officer at Denver Health. We'd be interested in exploring a formal consulting relationship to help implement these technologies. The irony was delicious. Denver's medical community was now seeking to hire me as a consultant at rates that reflected my true expertise, while Derek had once considered me pathetic for expecting fair compensation for similar insights. As the evening concluded, I felt a profound sense of closure about my time in Denver and my marriage to Derek. The city that had once felt like a prison of social obligations and diminished expectations had become simply another location where my work could have a positive impact. The painful memories of exploitation and manipulation had been replaced by confidence in my abilities and clarity about my worth. The journey from Derek's birthday party to that Denver conference represented more than professional success or financial independence. It demonstrated the transformative power of refusing to accept treatment that diminished my value or constrained my potential. The woman Derek had called pathetic had become someone whose expertise was sought by prestigious institutions and whose research was improving lives worldwide. Most importantly, I had learned to define my own worth based on my contributions to science and society, rather than seeking validation from people who were incapable of recognizing my true value. That lesson, hard-won through the pain of divorce and the courage to rebuild my life completely, had become the foundation for achievements that exceeded anything I could have imagined, while trapped in a marriage that demanded I minimize myself for someone else's comfort. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.